Hi. I presume the reason that I'm here this morning is because a little while ago I gave up my old life to start a new one that is all about creativity. It basically started for me with a TED Talk. In late 2010, I watched a TED Talk by Dave Eggers, the author of a heartbreaking work of staggering genius, among other fantastic novels. And he was talking about a writing centre he established for kids in San Francisco called 826 Valencia. It's a bit different to other writing centres in that it uses volunteer tutors, a lot of them who are writers, editors, publishers, journalists, to give kids one-on-one attention with their work or small group attention with their work, which is something that, as Dave realised when he founded it, not even the best teachers can provide that. It's also different because the front of the centre is a shop. It's a pirate supply store and it sells everything you need if you're a working buccaneer. There's like eye patches, treasure maps, peg legs, feed for your parrot, that sort of thing, which was initially simply because the space was zoned for retail and they had to sell something, so why not pirate supplies? But it was actually a stroke of genius because, first of all, it surprised everyone because it makes money. It makes money for the centre, it pays the rent, it keeps it open. But also, the kids, when they come into the centre, they have to go through the shop to get there. And something happens in their heads. They are told in the clearest possible way that they are not at school anymore and that they are in a space where new things are possible. So there are now 8 of these 826 centres around the US. They all have their own unique shop. In Brooklyn, I think it's the Superhero Supply Company. In Seattle, it's the Boring Store, which is absolutely not a shop for undercover secret agents. And there is one in London that Nick Hornby started called the Ministry of Stories. And so I listened to Dave Eggers talk about this and I just thought it was such a good idea. I was a journalist at the Sydney Morning Herald at the time and I sent it to my friend Tim Dick and he watched it and he also thought that it was an excellent idea. And to be honest, I would not have done anything more about it except Tim's quite good at doing things, just kind of getting things going. And so he went back to New Zealand for Christmas and I went back to Perth. And he phoned me and he said, look, I think we should do that. I think we should set one up. And so I said yes. And in January last year, we started setting up this thing that is now the Sydney Story Factory. I should make it clear at this point that neither Tim nor I had any experience whatsoever teaching children. We had absolutely no experience in not-for-profit sector and we had no experience starting any form of business whatsoever. I was an arts writer who had been the literary editor. Tim was the media editor and had been, amongst other things, a sort of opinion page editor before that. And I think the hardest, looking back, one of the hardest parts of the process was at that very, very early stage when you have to start talking about it, but it is still an incredibly vague and sort of unformed idea. And every time we spoke to people, we kind of expected people to laugh at us. But one of the things that was lucky for me was that having been literary editor, I knew some writers. And so the writers were the first people that we approached. The 826 movement is pretty much, was founded and is continued by writers, with Nick Hornby and Roddy Doyle also runs one in Dublin, Fighting Words. So we approached writers here, holding our breaths, and I spoke to Anna Funder, I spoke to Malcolm Knox, Peter Fitzsimons, Geraldine Brooks, Marcus Zuzak, and every single one of them said they would help. They all said that we could use their name and they would support us in whatever other ways that they could. And I think it was that initial support that was, because they were the first people who believed in us, and I think that in a lot of ways it was them believing in us that made us feel that it was possible. It's now a year and a quarter later, and we've nearly finished building our writing centre in Redfern. It has its own shop. Ours is the Martian Embassy and Gift Shop. And it sells things like My First Abduction Kit and Invasion Sunscreen for Martians because it's one planet closer to the sun for them, so they need to protect their skin. We've raised enough money to cover our first year of operations. We've just employed a fantastic storyteller-in-chief who's going to run our programs, who does know something about teaching children. And I've quit the Herald to be the first and up until now the only employee. More than 600 people have asked to volunteer with us and about 150 of them have been vetted and trained and are working with children. We started running pilot programs in schools last May when we launched at the Writers' Festival. And we have so far helped about 100 kids. They've written newspapers and they've written incredibly fantastic and beautiful stories. We try and honour their stories by publishing as best we can, so we get illustrators to do covers for them, we bind them, we put their photo on the back and a little bit about the author. And when we give them back to the kids, they look about 6 feet tall. People often ask me why I do this, and I kind of took a while to figure that out myself. I don't think it actually, there's a question today about courage, I don't think it had anything to do with courage actually, but I think it was because I was always one of those kids who loved writing and always had her head in a book. And I was lucky enough to have teachers who encouraged me in that and parents who encouraged me, and it set up the course of the rest of my life. Everything I've done has been about that. I also have 2 kids who are 4 and a half and 3, Grace and Seb, and I think they made me feel in a visceral way that it would be a great thing to have a place where being a bookish kid who likes writing would always be a good thing. Most kids don't care about that and they don't need it, but there is a very small percentage of kids who do need it and do care about it passionately. And that is where I think and where I hope we will change some lives. We haven't, it's too early for us and we haven't seen that, but we've started to see the very, very beginnings and it's very exciting. Thank you.